Well, let's transition. Let's get to some Guardians talk after. Oh, go ahead. Before you do that.
Before we get into that, we got to read. We got to get taken care of. This next segment of the show is brought to you by the USFL. Sunday, April 23rd, the USFL is back in Canton. Come celebrate pro football with free T-shirts, rally towels, and the whole family get great seats starting at just $10. So go buy your tickets today at usfl.com. The Cleveland Guardians avoided the three-game sweep against the Detroit Tigers behind a Jose Ramirez 3-run home run. They won the game 3-2. Fellas, we need your thoughts and your opinions.
Well, the first thing that I got from that was when I saw this on the rundown, I wanted to get, definitely when I seen Jason was here, I wanted to get his thoughts. The Jose Ramirez thing, right? When he got called the strike.
Yeah.
Now, I love the pitch clock. Love it to death. In that case, usually you see it where guys are in the box or whatever. But Jose Ramirez at the time was in the box. He got called for a strike because he was not looking at the pitcher.
He wasn't ready to go.
Ready to go. Do you think that's something that they should take a look at? And is this something that could potentially be harmful down the line if they don't kind of taper it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens when you try and build the plane while you're flying it, right? That's what they're doing with this. They really overhauled the game in one offseason, and they tried some of the stuff at AAA to see what works and what doesn't, and then they bring it to the majors. But this thing in particular, they have to take a look at, and they have to get this fixed. And you get pitchers like Max Scherzer, who's trying to manipulate the system, and he's trying to manipulate the timing of the batters. I don't blame him. Like, you're a competitor, I would too. There's nothing wrong with that. But this part was weird because he was in the box, but he wasn't ready to go, and the pitcher wasn't on the mound. And as soon as he stepped on the mound, Jose wasn't ready to go, so it's a strike. Is my understanding of it. Maybe I've got something wrong on that. But the problem is you're trying to retrain the brain of these guys. Like I'd be telling Brad, you can't shoot from the paint anymore, or you can't be on this part of the it's just when a pitcher steps off the mound, the batter steps out of the box. It's been that way for 50 years. And now they're telling the batters they can't leave the box because the pitcher can get right back on the rubber. So when the pitcher's on the rubber, you got to be ready to go. So it's just one of these nuances. It's maybe one of those things that it's an unintended consequence of the new rule, and they're going to have to take a look at this sooner than later because this is going to become a thing.
Well, I've always said this, Jason. You talk about unintended consequences. Speeding up the clock, somebody's going to get hurt here, right? Because the game is meant to be played at a pace, right? You can't go out and play 18 holes of golf and every time you approach the ball, just start, as soon as you get there, start swinging. You can't do it, right? It just cannot be done. And something's going to give at some point in time, but they'll find out. I get them trying to understand and pick up the game in a better fashion and make it more watchable for people, right? But you can only go so far, right? So I'm really interested to see how the experiment shakes out at the end. I like to know as we get later on in the year how many people are going down.
October is going to be fascinating when it's the playoffs and every pitch matters and it's second and third and one out in the seventh inning, and you got to go. Like you've used your step offs or whatever, and like the clock's winding down and you got to go. And I'm really fascinated to see that. Like April, okay, whatever. Like and Karinchak's a good example because Karinchak really didn't have any issues in spring training with the clock.
Right.
And the Guardians were kind of pleasantly surprised. But you get into the season, things change a little bit.
Right.
And things slow down a little bit. And he's had a couple issues with the pitch clock. Okay, so September pennant race, what's it going to be like? October playoffs, what's it going to be like? World Series, what's it going to be like? So I'm fascinated to see. Ultimately, maybe they add 5 seconds.
You mean when somebody blow the game because the rules came and bit them?
I mean,
yeah. No, it's going to happen.
Oh, yeah. Then one of the owners going to blow up and go sideways, right? Yeah.
Well, Clase hasn't been the same this year. His velocity's down just a touch, just a mile or two. And the Guardians sort of feel like the pitch clock because he was so slow in the past, and now he's got to go, and now he's got to ramp up and go. And they feel like the pitch clock has been one of the things with him. Zach Meisel, that's not mine. Zach Meisel wrote about that for us a couple of days ago, mentioned it. So these are all things, and maybe next year, like I said, maybe next year they put 5 seconds on. Who's 20 instead of 15, 25 instead of 20. There's things that probably wouldn't add a ton of time to the game, but still gets the point across and gives these guys an extra half second to breathe. I don't know, but this thing that we saw yesterday
was different.
They need to address. I mean, they did it in the middle of the season with the sticky stuff. They changed the rules right in the middle of the season. So there's nothing that would stop them from. It's only April. This is brand new. and there's nothing that would prevent them from taking a look at that specific aspect of this rule.
And Tito, to his point, when he was explaining it after the game, he said, "Look, they've been telling us to tell our guys
stay in the box.
Don't move away. Don't step out. Don't adjust your wristbands. Continue to." And the eye contact thing is big because some people assume that, hey, just because I'm in the box, I'm good. No, you got to actually be paying attention and ready to go. And it doesn't really matter what the pitcher is doing. And he said it's just so hard to get these guys.
Right.
This is hard. Like when you step out, and Jose's doing his routine.
He's just he's standing there swinging the bat,
just trying to stay loose.
Right.
He doesn't want to be, batting and hitting is all about rhythm.
Right.
It's almost a dance, and for them to tell a guy to stand up there like a statue, it's just difficult to kind of really, change the way people are hardwired.
I mean, an easy solution is if the pitcher steps off the rubber, once he gets back on, you have 1 second or 2 seconds to be back in your, whatever.
Yeah.
And that way that guys can stay in the box. That way, Jose, exactly what he did is legal. He's still in the box. All he has to do is just get ready to go.
And reset itself. In terms of what happened on the field, they lose the doubleheader to the Tigers. And I was talking to Matt Derry the other day when I was on the radio, and he says, man, that's just what the Guardians do. Like, the Guardians, every game is close. Like, there is no game where you watch the Guardians, you're like, wow, it's 9-2. They get out there and they blow them out, and you can go home and enjoy the game. They did salvage the sweep yesterday. Jason, when you look at the Guardians and with the Tigers, I think one of the things that, people don't really get is they're going to play less games against the Tigers and the Royals and those guys. So is it a little bit disappointing when you do see them play the Tigers and you're kind of thinking like, hey, you don't want to think you're going to sweep everybody, but you at least want to take 2 or 3 out of the softer teams.
Yeah, I mean, ideally you want to take 2 or 3 every series. It's a 667 winning percentage.
Right.
Winning 67% of your games, you're going to the playoffs. And obviously that's not going to happen. You're going to get a few sweeps. You're going to get swept a few times. You're not going to beat the Tigers. I don't care how bad of a team they are. You're not going to beat them every game. It was disappointing to lose both in the doubleheader. But, whatever. It's April. I'm more concerned with how this team's playing in September than they are in April. This team usually gets off to a little bit slow starts under Tito in April because he's building and building and building this thing. And he wants them playing at their best, August, September, October, which traditionally they've done under him. So I get the frustration. They've had a ton of injuries already with the pitching staff. They're already thin a little bit on the bullpen because they've had to overuse some guys. And we've seen the moves now, Hunter Gaddis going down. I'm really curious to see who they bring up next week. They got a lot of options to fill that spot. We've seen movement with prospects coming up and down.
Yeah.
Brian
So
Rocchio.
what do you think long term, right? Because at some point you had to turn your prospects out and say, let me see what you got here. Right?
And they brought Rocchio up. Rocchio.
And I'm not talking about for a week.
Yeah, like they.
I'll give you a look-see.
But it looks like he's gonna be. They brought him up, and they're gonna sit him back down.
Yeah.
And a lot of people got excited because they're like, "Whoa, wow, we already had Arias up here, and then we got him, and I would say he's their best prospect, infield prospect, right?"
Arias?
Rocchio. Yeah, Rocchio.
Yeah, Rocchio is. Listen, plans change all the time. It was my understanding last year they were sort of viewing Jimenez and Arias as up the middle future combination of the future. Okay. Arias didn't have a great year in AAA last year. He's here now. They've moved him around, given him a look at different spots. He's ahead time-wise of Rocchio. Doesn't mean he's ahead on their plans, though. Mm-hmm. But the Rocchio thing was really, Rosario's banged up a little bit. Freeman's a little bit banged up. So they brought him up as an insurance policy. Mm-hmm. Those guys are fine. They didn't need to go on the IL. So now Rocchio goes back down. He'll go back down. I don't know if it's official. It'll probably happen today. And they needed another arm. They need a reliever in the bullpen. They're a little thin right now on arms.
Jay, let me ask you a question. So when they bring people up, how long do they give you a look in baseball, right? How typically?
Well, it depends on what the reason that you're there. Like sometimes you're there for one day. You're there to make one spot start because it's a doubleheader and you need a guy, and when you come up, you're going right back down after the game. Sometimes the situation, they had injuries with Plesac and Savali in 2019. Those guys came up with knowing you pitch well, you're going to stick. And that's why I'll spin this ahead to next week with Gaddis going down. Logan Allen is an option. Tanner Bybee, who I've been really anxious to see, is an option. Xavier Curry, they could pull from the bullpen and give him a start. But these guys are getting to the point where you talk about you've got all these prospects. Let's see what you have. Well, this could be an opportunity next week with that rotation spot opening with them sending Gaddis down. Battenfield pitched well the other day. I'm still not convinced he's going to be okay long term. But, give him his credit. He did well for one start. But Bybee or Logan Allen, if they slot them in next week, that's a situation where I think they're here as long as they perform.
Because typically it used to be like this. You would use your young talent to motivate your older personnel to keep somebody on their heels, to keep them hungry, right? Because sometimes you can become complacent.
Absolutely.
Right, and so that's why I was asking. Typically they're using the minor leagues like their G League, NBA.
Well, they don't have old guys to motivate. They're all young.
When I say old guys, I say the people in front of you. Even the vet guy, you got to keep some heat on them sometime.
Rosario is not going anywhere. I know people get frustrated.
That's old boy's boy. So he ain't going nowhere.
Rosario's not going anywhere until
that's Ramirez's friend.
Rosario's not going anywhere until he goes somewhere.
He ain't going nowhere.
For some pieces.
Yeah, but I mean, Tito is so loyal to him. That's a guy that they just. I think he's here all year. I think he's a shortstop all year. He's off to a terrible start. He's gotten off to worse April starts. Believe me, he's just one of the. He could be one of those guys that don't like the cold. And as the weather warms, so does his bat. He's traditionally been a slow starter. And I would like to see him at least go lower in the order. I think Jimenez should be batting second. He's the second best hitter on the team, and he's hitting the lower half of the lineup. That's the one thing with Tito that I don't understand. But we'll see. Rosario, I think, is here all year. I don't think they're going to move him. They do have a bunch of shortstop prospects who probably one of them, whether it be Rocchio or Arias, or maybe it's Jimenez, and they slide one of these guys over to second. But I think for this year it's Rosario.
That's the craziest thing about it, because when you just a guy when you just watching and doing stuff with the Guardians and looking at it, you just look how many middle infielders they got. The Rocchio guy who could play second base or shortstop. You already have Arias up here who's doing shortstop in third base. He's basically been an infield platooner.
Tyler Freeman.
Angel Martinez is a guy.
He's a little bit lower down.
So there's 5-6 dudes.
But they like, and a lot of teams feel this way. Shortstop is your most athletic position. If you can play shortstop in baseball, you can play anywhere in baseball. So stockpile the middle infield prospects.
Okay.
And then if you have a hole at second, if you have a hole at third, if you can send them to right field, you can send them to left field. You should have the athleticism to be able to move around
that's smart.
And fill different spots. And that's why. But at some point, like, they're going to have to make a move. And you hear Bull scream all the time, Brian Reynolds. He wants Brian Reynolds. And they may get to the point this year where they have to trade for a bat. But I think right now, April, May, and June, and July is to see where are our holes, where are we weak. And I've said this for a year and a half, and they still haven't made a big move. They have everything they need to go get whatever it is they want. If they need an arm, they can go get an arm. If they need a big corner bat, they have the prospect capital to go get a bat. If they need a starting pitcher, they have a prospect capital to go get that. It may hurt with the pieces that they have to send out, but they have everything they need. They have a top outfield prospect in George Valera, top middle infield prospects, you just rattled them off. 3 top arms, Tanner Bybee, Gavin Williams, Daniel Espino. They have the pieces that other teams covet. They have everything they need to go get whatever they want.
Earl, we got all the sponsors we need.
And what they want may be to just call those guys up. It
Bring
could
them
be.
up.
Go ahead.
All right, man. Great first hour.